Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure podcast. My name is Nikki Bass and I will be bringing you thoughts and ideas and hopefully some inspiration on how to build more adventure into your everyday life. So today it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Kieron Achara to the show. Kieron is a former professional basketball player who recently retired from a career spanning more than 2 decades. He was captain of the GB squad, earning 105 international caps, and he competed at the 2012 Olympics and 2018 Commonwealth Games. Kieron now works as a consultant to a number of organisations where he champions athlete transition and mental health awareness. He is also patron founder of Rocks in the Community, which uses sport as a tool to improve people's lives. So Kieron was introduced to me by the wonderful Joyce Orsay, who appeared on season 1, episode 11 of the show. And having gone through the transition from the military myself, which is as much about your identity as this is about the career or the job that you do, I guess I was really interested to speak to Kieron and find out how that is from an athlete's perspective. I suspect there are probably some similarities, but some real differences as well. So it's a real pleasure to have you here, Kieron. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
I guess my first question really is, what inspired you when you knew your career was coming to an end in terms of your basketball career? What inspired you to move into the sort of the well-being space, work around mental health awareness?
It's actually a good question. I sometimes ask myself that. To be frank, I was very fortunate. I went back to university my last couple of years playing because, when you say you know your career's coming to an end, you actually don't know your career's coming to an end. You kind of make the decision to, or someone makes it for you. So it was kind of like playing with, that kind of, do I retire now? What's next? So forth. So I went back to university and I did a master's in leadership and management. But as a part of that course, I chose my dissertation to be on the athlete transition out of sport. And from that, I then got to interview multiple athletes about their own journeys out of sport. And from that conversation, it went from being education to being therapy. Listening to other people who had went through a transition, kind of talking about what worked for them, what didn't work for them, the kind of feelings they were having. It kind of gave me two senses. One, it made me feel I had hope, like I can go on to be something else. And secondly, it was that feeling of, okay, actually, joining the dots, I wasn't alone, you know what I mean? And that was a real powerful thing for me. So the fact that I felt that I was planned, I had prepared, I had a great career, I had savings, I knew I was in no rush, and I still felt overwhelmed. I thought about how many other athletes must be going through this exact same thing. And that's when it kind of clicked for me to think that, we needed to kind of prepare better, help athletes on that journey. And, like I said, they still have to be proactive, but giving them some type of guidance could give them a little bit more control of their lives.
That's really interesting, isn't it? How, in a way that I suppose you had access to something that probably most athletes don't or didn't when they transition, in the sense that, like you said, you were doing your masters and you were actually able to access all of this sort of the wealth of information and insight. I imagine there are probably lots of sort of commonalities in some of the challenges that people face when they do leave a professional career in sport. And I was just wondering, for you, what were the biggest challenges that you faced or continue to face as you move into a new career?
It's quite funny because a lot of people talk about I guess you look at the kind of Hollywood story of the person who then spirals into depression or whatever from whatever. For me, it was those little nuanced things. So it was things that I'd never even I don't think I could have prepared for in any way. So I'll give you an example. Getting deleted from the team group chat, something that, and on that group chat essentially showed you when to show up for training or do this or do that. And so things that were, irrelevant to me now, it kind of be like, oh wow, I've just lost this kind of support group, because the players were your friends, your family, and that's the way in sporting culture you kind of buy into this family, you know, and I guess it's the same in the military. You know, you have this kind of family feel. You protect your own and you kind of look after. But that was then gone. So I was saying that the services I used to have, like the sports psychologist, the physio, the team doctor, all these supports were now gone, and I was left alone. And my thought process was, I felt that I was an independent person. When I realised actually I wasn't. I was given all this support without actually thinking about what would I do if this wasn't there for me. So I was saying that I was laughing to my wife about getting a GP. A GP. I didn't have a GP because if anything ever happened to me, I called up my team doctor. You know, so all these little interesting, little nuanced things just kind of started to build up. I was relearning so much. So I went from this, you know, I'm 30, 36, 35 and I retired, thinking about, you know, just little things like paying bills and doing this and doing that. It's something I had to kind of relearn. So I think for me, that was the hardest part. And then secondly, it was definitely the identity aspect of things that you kind of alluded to earlier on. Because even now, I was thinking about the bio you just said from introduction. It's like who am I? You know, it's former this, former that. Like, what am I now? Actually, if I'm just and that's for me. I'm still learning this because I don't like. I am known for basketball, but how long will that be? Like, is after 5 years, I say now, well, now I'm a sports consultant, or I am this, or I am that. You know, so. Right now, I feel like I'm still clinging on to it, and I joke that even when I get dressed up for work, I still wear my trainers because, you know, that's the sporty bit. I'm not completely ready to be putting on a suit and tie just yet, but it's just these little things. It's nuance. It's like I am known for being something. I have had all this support, and now I just felt like it was completely lost, and I had to, find a new identity.
It's just fascinating, isn't it? Like you said, it's a real combination of the sort of the practical in terms of it's not just, and I think this, it really does relate in lots of ways to the sort of the military transition, is that the support that you don't even think about being there from a practical point of view, but also from an emotional point of view, like you said, the support you get from being part of that team and from the people around you. And in a way, it's interesting. We talk about change management in organizations, but we don't really do it that well for individuals. So I was just thinking that thing of suddenly being cut from a WhatsApp chat or a group chat around and suddenly feeling just in a way cast to one side, even though that's not obviously the intention. And I think that's a really familiar feeling from a lot of people from wherever they transition on from, and can have a real impact actually, I think, on your sense of, like you said, that sense of belonging.
Exactly. And that's my focal point now. When I look at the things I'm trying to achieve, you know, I talk about empowerment and really helping people, not just athletes, people prepare for transitions. Because as you see now, there's, you know, going back to my mother's generation, it was kind of like a job for life. You got in there, you kind of work. That doesn't happen now. People are changing jobs, you know, every 5 years or so. So those kind of changes, those kind of cultural shifts, you know, you go into a business and you do a cultural audit and you kind of prepare for this, prepare for that. Well, actually, by the time that audit's completed and you're embedding this new culture, the turnover of your staff could be completely, transcending. So my focus right now is those kind of coping strategies for individuals, how to kind of work on understanding themselves, having that little bit of self-awareness piece, that no matter what environment they go into or what challenges they face, they have certain coping strategies to kind of help them deal with those things and mitigate the risk of real poor mental health.
Mm. And see, I mean, you talk about the challenge of, I guess, establishing a new identity. Who am I going forward rather than who am I looking back? And I suppose my next question sort of linked into that in a way is that despite the challenges of moving on, actually, I imagine there are some real benefits that actually come from making that change and having made that decision. I was just wondering, what have been the ones that have been, that in a way you didn't anticipate, and you're able to look and go, oh, wow, that's something that's brought so much to my life that I hadn't even thought about?
You know what? I always said I was a people person. I've always had the ability to be able to speak to people, but it was still very siloed in its approach. You know, because I was in this athlete realm, and that's kind of what you dealt with on a day-to-day basis. But by leaving that space for a little bit, I kind of got to reflect on certain things. And, you know, when you're trying to reinvent yourself, you have to go and ask questions. And So I'm now, pre lockdown, it was, going for coffees, kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to be. And I'd mentioned this, that, one day I'm thinking I'm going to be a teacher, the next day I'm in the army, police, whatever it may be. But I'm listening to all these different perspectives, other people's journeys, how they got to that point. And what you start to do is you start joining the dots, and you're thinking, actually, the sport world is very well suited with, for example, the work I'm doing within mental health and wellbeing right now. I think the two marry up really well together about kind of promoting the kind of messages and using sport as that tool. Or, I'm now speaking to people from maybe more of an artistic, creative kind of perspective and thinking, okay, that would actually work really well with this, and this, So I think the ability to be able to, it's not something I anticipated, but actually being able to take a step away from what I was and kind of opening my mind, getting out of my comfort zone a little bit and just saying yes to new things. So right now I'm doing an array of work. I'm doing the whole, pundit on Sky, and I was on the radio yesterday hosting my first radio show, and okay, that is still sport related, but it's a completely different field, and what I'm saying is I have so much more respect for other fields now, because actually getting to listen to their stories and seeing the kind of relationships and how they can kind of marry together, I think that is something that for me has been a real benefit. And I hope, no matter what, if, say, for example, I go into one thing, that I keep this kind of open mind, because what I'm saying is the more holistic you can be in your approach, the more efficient and effective I think that work can be.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, just to have the opportunity to consider things from a different perspective and in a way that you don't realize that you haven't done, but then suddenly those sort of opportunities are there, and maybe having the freedom to explore them as well.
And what comes into that too, time management. So I was always saying my time management was impeccable, and athletes are branded as having great time management skills. But the reason we had such great time management skills is because, again, going back to that, you were told where to be, when to be there. All you have to do is show up. So then all of a sudden it was this kind of freedom, and I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is great. I can do whatever I want. But then it was like, okay, what am I actually going to do? So I've kind of reinvented that with kind of setting aside time for things I would never have done, even just from an R&R perspective. It was kind of embedded into us when we rested, why we rested. But actually, your why wasn't the real why. It was because you were told to. So now it's kind of finding that balance as well. Like I went away started my retirement to Barcelona to visit one of my old teammates in Spain. Took my family during the season. I had never been away during the year before because of my basketball commitments. I had missed all my friends' weddings, stag do's. I'd missed birthdays, and then all of a sudden I could actually put into my diary certain things and work around that. And that kind of feeling of, I guess, autonomy was another welcomed change in my life.
It's really interesting to go from that place of having so much support, then missing that support, and then actually you can see in a way how the change starts. Change starts to manifest, and you start to go, actually, this freedom is something that I haven't had, and that's unique, and maybe that's
I've a perception thing as well. I think it's kind of helping yourself understand that could be very easily perceived as a negative, but it quickly turns into a positive. And that's another thing I'm talking about, the whole reframing of the mind to think, okay, a lot of people kind of get forced into retirement in sport because of an injury or they're released. But how can you actually turn that into a positive and say, okay, now you've got this time to do this, this, and this, what are you going to do next? And that's a hard thing to do, but if you can kind of accomplish that, I see a lot of success in your future.
Definitely. So you touched on it a little bit just then, just thinking about actually going forward, what is next? What have you got particular goals, or are you, like you said, just sort of seeing where the wind takes you in a way?
I don't have particular goals, and that's the scary thing for me, because when I said I was very driven, very goal driven, so for example, my whole career was based on that. So, going first playing basketball was to get a scholarship to the States. I accomplished that. Then it was to make the Olympic team. I accomplished that. It was to and that was actually my plan to retire after that, but I actually realised I still loved the game. And I kept on going and going. So all these little miniature goals were kind of set in my way. And then all of a sudden it's just kind of like, okay, I don't have a complete direction, but the things that I'm really interested in. So for me, about people development, the whole championing mental health, I've kind of used my basketball story and my platform from that to kind of put myself in good positions to kind of be helping with those causes. So right now, I'm really fixated on the whole athlete support aspect of things. I really, really want to make sure that from a duty of care perspective, and you've seen multiple stories in the press recently, and it's something because I believe that sport is a great tool for mental health and for positive mental health. But there's at the other end of the spectrum, at the elite end, it can actually be the reason for poor mental health. So it's kind of finding that balance and striking that. So that's somewhere I'm really kind of placed. I just don't know, like I said, from a goal perspective, it's more of a day-to-day kind of thing. I haven't actually said, right, okay, in 5 years' time I want to make sure I have my own business set up around this space or whatever. So I talk about being conflicted. Right now I am conflicted between I'm enjoying this kind of freedom and not actually having a complete plan, but that's how it's in my DNA. So I'm kind of like searching for that and seeking for it at the same time. So it's very much a day by day process, but I know that the areas I'm passionate about, and that's a good thing now because I'm now starting to say no to certain things that are not interesting to me. Before it was maybe, okay, I'm going to do that because I could get some money for that. Well, actually, I'm past that. I'm not. It needs to be. I'm very purpose driven at this moment in time. I just haven't got an end goal.
And it's interesting, that whole sort of point about goals and the analogy, like you said, with elite sport in the end, that when you are completely focused on a goal or on achievement, sometimes that can start to undermine your perspective or enjoyment of whether it's the sport or in general in life, actually. Rather, something about embracing the journey and being able to take moments from that as well, and being able to see those, I guess, failures, or when the dips happen or when the downsides happen, seeing those as part of the learning too.
And that was, I talk about regrets as well. I wouldn't say I had regrets with my career, but if I was to talk to my younger self, I was very fortunate. I played in countries like Spain, Italy, Greece, Bulgaria. When I first started my career, I was so fixated on my sport that I didn't actually embrace the culture and the cultural changes and everything else, because it was training, go to sleep, nutrition, back to training. It wasn't going to explore Rome when I have a day off. So that was one of my regrets. I would say that when I'm speaking to younger players now, I talk about finding that balance between, this is actually your life. You're living your life. You're not just living to try and achieve a goal. There's a whole journey aspect to that as well. So that's some of the little golden nuggets I try and reiterate and emphasize to especially the younger athletes now that I kind of take under my wing.
Amazing. So if somebody's listening now and they're going through potentially, or thinking of going through, their own career transition or moving from doing one thing to another, what's one piece of advice you'd give them from your journey so far?
Well, the first piece of advice, and this is that it's very tricky for a lot of people, is if you're preparing and planning for a transition, so you maybe still don't know exactly what you want, but what you're doing right now is not what you want. There's a very key aspect to that for me is it's kind of your situation. So a lot of people don't think of the situation. So for example, when I retired, my wife was pregnant with her second child, and the stress of having the second child while retiring at the exact same time. So now it was kind of like this and this. So my thing is, if you're planning for change, make it incremental. So it's not like move away, have a child, quit your job,
do it all at once. Yeah.
It's a kind of incremental change. One of the comfort zones I had was I started saving the last couple of years, putting a little bit away each month, because I was thinking, okay, this is my, going to be my runway. If I was out without work, so I can actually start thinking and planning ahead, that I know that my bills were kind of covered and this and this. And I know not everyone has that luxury, but having a little bit of savings can really, really help emphasize that, because it kind of makes you say, right, I'm not going to be forced into changing just because of the change. I'm actually going to do something I want. The other thing for me too was I go back to that whole self-awareness piece. There was a lot of lucrative jobs I was offered after I was done, which would have made me some good income. But when I actually reflected back on my own values, what the kind of messages I've said my whole career about, healthy lifestyles and, trying to kind of empower and create belief for the younger generation, some of the work that I was offered, it kind of conflicted with that, in my opinion. So I knew I couldn't give it my all. You know what I mean? So we always talk about being your authentic self and having values and having a purpose. I believe that when you make a change, it doesn't have to be the be all and end all of who you are and what you are, but having some type of purpose behind that, I think can really, really help your work. And I've realized that now with the work I'm doing, it's not if I was to say in a couple, 2-3 years ago, the areas of work I'm doing, like the work I'm doing with Frog Systems, I could never have envisaged that, working with a mental health platform. But it's something I'm actually really, really passionate about, because it's all about the whole empowering, offering hope and support. So actually it fits really, really well. So again, having your purpose, kind of being a little bit more self-aware, I think it can really help you align with what kind of work you want to be taking up. And more importantly, the work that you don't want to be taking.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, isn't it? Because it's about what helps you to set those boundaries, I guess. And also, the first point you touched on around the financial aspect, I think is really interesting and really important, because I think it's something that's often overlooked potentially when we talk about, yes, go and follow your dreams or do what you can be anything you want and all this sort of thing. But like you said, the reality is if you've got a family or, you've got commitments, other financial commitments, you've got houses, that sort of thing, then actually that can undermine your well-being just as much as so. the job or potentially whatever you end up going into. So I think you're right. I think if you have that established, then actually you're much freer to take on other maybe purpose-led work too, as well.
So for my mother, for example, my mother worked 2 to 3 jobs, and the work that she did wasn't something that she would have said, okay, this is what I wanted to do. But her purpose was to make sure that her kids were put in a position that they could kind of follow their dreams and kind of push on and do certain things. So I think the end game for my mother, her purpose helped her endure and get through the work that she needs to do. And I see that with some people too, that they might have work that they don't particularly love to do, but they have a hobby on top of that, and that can kind of offset it. So their purpose is, okay, I'm doing this to do X, Y, and Z, but here, this little hobby or this little passion on the side is what keeps my well-being where it needs to be as well. So it's always kind of weighing up those options. If you're just doing things that you just dislike all the time, it's going to be overpowering and overbearing at times. But if you can find the purpose in what you do, or then find something on the side to kind of balance that, I think that's a definite compromise.
Amazing. No, absolutely. So that's been so insightful. Honestly, I could keep on talking for hours about this. If people want to find out more about you, about your work, where can they go?
Yeah, I guess I'm, one of those social media gurus now. I'm found on all platforms, mainly on Twitter, at Kieron Achara. No one knows how to spell my name, so that's KIERONACHARA. That's my Twitter handle and my Instagram handle. Also, through Frog Systems, the work I'm doing at Frog right now, we're signposting through lived experience stories, hope and support, and that's at frog.net. So yeah, that's the 2 platforms that are mainly used. But like my social medias, I'm always open to chat on there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure all those links are in the show notes as well. So if anyone does want to reach out to you or find out more about what you do, they can pick up and find that afterwards.
Brilliant.
That's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Kieron, for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, wishing you all the very best with your career as you move forward. And yeah, we'll hopefully have you back at some point to talk about the next stage and how we can now refer to you as well. So that would be brilliant. Awesome. Thanks so much again. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
So I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kieron. I thought it was so interesting, some of the parallels I could draw around transition. And I think transition from all sort of walks of life around that sort of rediscovering or finding that identity, fitting yourself to a new identity in a way and trying that out and seeing what that looks like. And this week, I wanted to explore a bit more this idea of stepping out from a place of comfort or a place that we know into somewhere that feels possibly less comfortable, that's less familiar in a lot of ways. Because I think that's a lot of what transition, particularly career transition, is about. And often what prevents us from taking those decisions earlier is because we're having to decide from going from something which is known into something which is unknown, that we can't see where it'll go. And we're trying to weigh up which we will regret more, which we will enjoy more, which will have the impact that it wants. Is it better to sit where you feel safe, where you are known, but also potentially feel frustrated, or that there might be something that fits better on the other side, wherever that other side might be. And so, yeah, that was just something I wanted to pick up on this week, thinking, what is it that holds us back from making those decisions where we are able to step out of our comfort zone? And what is it that enables us to be able to make those potentially life-changing decisions? And there were a number of things I think that Kieron mentioned, which was around it's having support somewhere. It's about being able to prepare yourself in some way. And for him, it was undertaking a master's, which gave him sort of a potentially a different lens with which to see the world. That didn't mean that transition was less difficult, but it did mean he felt that there were more options on the other side. And I think that's really important. I think, it comes back to so many of the conversations I've had with people taking on big adventures. You might make that decision to make that change, but that often that there is quite a lot of groundwork that goes in beforehand in order to take on the adventure, in order to try something new, in order to explore, try on something and see if it might fit. And it can be in the form of study, as in Kieron's case. It can be trying smaller adventures. It can be doing things or connecting with people within that space that you think, actually, I'd love to hear more from them and find out what their experience has been. It's about taking those steps that move us closer to being able to make those decisions, being able to sit with that uncomfortable feeling that actually we can't know what it will be like once we cross that line. But also, I think there's an element of seeing something building up to something being life-changing. Whereas actually, if we see it as a smaller change or a tweak or an experiment, it can feel easier to give it a go. That there's no way you can come back. Well, often there is a way you can come back, or is there a way you can divert. And often by taking one step, it might lead to all sorts of other opportunities that you hadn't even considered. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts for this week. I'd love to know what you think. As always, please do get in touch. You can reach me via Instagram, Resilience at Work. You can get in touch via my website, resiliencework.co.uk, or you can join us on Facebook in the Everyday Adventure Club. So I'm back next week with the last episode of season 2. I can't believe it. Where is this time gone? Somehow we have got to the end of March, and I have one wonderful guest to share with you for the rest of this season. We'll be back again with season 3, not too long afterwards. So don't worry if you're worried about where you're going to get your fix. It's fine. It's coming. But yes, in the meantime, I hope you join me again next week, and I look forward to seeing you then. Take care. Bye.